My dad is a very logical and skeptical person. He doesn't really indulge in or entertain ghost stories or superstitions or anything like that. His father, my pop, also shares the same mindset. One night when my dad was a kid, probably like 8 or 9, him and his family all went to bed like any other night. It was fairly late when my pop said that he was awoken to the sight of a little boy at the foot of his bed. The boy looked familiar to Pop, but he couldn't quite put his finger on just who this little boy was. Part of him believed that it was just a dream, but for some reason he wasn't frightened by the sight of the boy. He asked him if there was something wrong, what was wrong, or if he was okay, stuff like that. The boy just told him that he was lost, and he didn't know where he was. Then he ran out of the room, and Pop got out of bed to follow him, but the boy just seemed to have disappeared. He figured that he was just imagining things, so he went back to sleep and thought nothing of it. The next morning, my dad found out that one of his school friends' little brothers, who lived very close by to them, only a few houses down, had passed away in his sleep that night. He was only very young, maybe 7 years old himself. He had come home from school the day before complaining of a sore throat, and his parents thought nothing of it as they sent him to bed that night. He died of meningitis in his sleep. Pop was certain that he saw that little boy that night. To this day, my dad is still friends with that same friend. He even worked for him at some point. I would say that I was agnostic, leaning towards atheist before my dad told me this story. I'd like to think that there's something after death, but I find it unrealistic. However, ever since he told me this story, I'll admit I've thought about death a little bit differently. Alright everyone, welcome back to more Campfire Stories. Today we're going to be reading through some unexplainable, unsettling, and just downright disturbing stories from both submissions to the channel and from the rest of the internet. These stories are wild, so without wasting any time, let's jump right in. I, a 23-year-old female, had just arrived home. I was laying in bed relaxing when I heard my roommate, a 27-year-old male, right outside my window, screaming a pure guttural fuck. I heard him punch his truck and say, "God fucking damn it." So I got out of bed to unlock the door because I'm guessing it was a shitty day. But he wasn't outside. The neighbors were playing with their kids. It was a quiet but somewhat busy street. So I text him, "Are you okay?" And 20 minutes later, I get a text. I'm on my way home, and I'm fucking pissed. Still a 30 to 40 minute drive. He hasn't left work. So when he gets home, I ask him if he came home before driving off. He said no. I asked if he lost his cool, and he asked me how I knew that. I said, "Was it around 5:50 p.m.? He said yes, it was right around the time we were texting. I asked him if he said those words and punched his truck, and he said it was verbatim what he did and said. Not sure what this means. He was over 20 miles away towards the city. There is no possible way that I could have heard him. But I did, and I'm kinda freaked out. In June of 2018, my daughter and I walked up the road a quarter of a mile away to the local Waffle House for breakfast. Since we were walking, I only took a house key and my debit card and placed them in my jeans pocket. After breakfast, we walked up to the cashier with the ticket, I paid for the meal, then we left and proceeded to walk back home. When we were almost there, I reached into my pants pocket to grab my key to unlock the door and noticed that my card was not in my pocket. I obviously panicked, so we turned around before unlocking the door and went back to the Waffle House to see if I left the card with the cashier. We walked quickly back, also looking along the side of the road in case I dropped it. Once we got back to the Waffle House, the cashier said she gave my card back to me and that no one had turned in any lost cards. I felt sick, and all I could think of was hurrying back home and calling the credit card company to cancel my card. We proceeded back towards home again and finally made it back. I unlocked the door and walked past the kitchen and noticed from the corner of my eye a piece of paper folded on the countertop. After opening the paper, I was shocked to discover that it was my receipt from the Waffle House wrapped around my debit card. The card and receipt were back at home before I had even entered the house. Just to be clear, my daughter was walking right behind me when I unlocked the door and entered the home, so she didn't have time to place my card and the receipt in the kitchen. What the fuck? This is a very strange one, especially since both people saw this card go missing after it was used at the Waffle House, only for it to reappear back in their home. Now, your credit card is obviously something you don't want to lose, but something else you're not going to want to lose are your brand new earbuds from Raycon. Although I'm sure many of you guys have heard of Raycon's earbuds before, there is a reason why they're so popular. With tens of thousands of 5-star reviews, Raycon's everyday earbuds offer superior sound quality for half the price of competing brands. I honestly have been pleasantly surprised by the build quality on these. Considering the price, you wouldn't expect them to have such high quality materials, but they really do feel very sturdy and, again, just very premium. I've been using these as my sole pair of headphones since I got them. Whether I'm just walking around listening to audiobooks at the end of the day, working out at the gym, or just listening to music, Raycon's everyday earbuds are a treat to use. I decided to pick up my pair in flare red, but they also come in carbon black, electric blue, and rose gold. Raycon's earbuds also come with both noise isolation and awareness mode features, so you can either immerse yourself in whatever you're listening to, or you can stay connected with the outside world. If you enjoy listening to music, podcasts, or audiobooks, why not treat yourself to a new pair of Raycons? Go to buyraycon.com/fortuneyt or click the link in the description to get 20% off your order, and you'll also get free shipping. Thank you so much to Raycon for the sponsorship. Now, back to the stories. I'm a criminal defense investigator. I had a murder case involving two brothers. The one accused of the murders was very autistic, and his brother was schizophrenic. The schizophrenic brother lived in a potato shack in the middle of the desert. I needed to talk to him several times throughout the course of the investigation, and since he didn't have a phone or any electricity, I had to drive several hours out to his house and yell his name from the fence line until he came out of the shack. This investigation lasted for several years, and over time, I developed a rapport with the schizophrenic brother, and I kind of got to like him. He would talk your ear off about the aliens with golden eyes and the underground tunnels that connect all the Walmarts in the country, but he was pretty entertaining, and part of me wonders how much of it was just a show. The schizophrenic brother eventually gets a girlfriend. She's kind of a tweaker who has mistaken his schizophrenia for meth-induced psychosis. I talked to her a few times in jail when she was sober, and she was surprisingly charming and insightful. The last time I go to see the schizophrenic brother, it's a dark winter night and the tweaker girlfriend is there. She's lurking in the shadows and staring daggers at me the entire time I'm talking to him. I cut off his conversation about the speakers and his fillings and walked back to my truck to leave. A minute later, he comes running out and tells me that he wants to show me something in his shack. He's never invited me inside before, and I'm not thrilled by the prospect. The whole thing feels off to me, so I tell him I have to get going and start the truck. The look of relief on his face when I declined to go inside convinced me that the tweaker girlfriend was waiting behind the door with a hammer or something. A few months later, I learned that she shot him in his sleep and stashed his body in an old refrigerator. She has since pled guilty to his murder. My parents tell this story about me as a child that scared them. Apparently, I woke up very early one morning from a nightmare, crying and screaming. When they came to comfort me and ask me what was wrong, I kept telling them about a plane crash and that everyone is burning and falling. They put me back to sleep and went back to bed themselves, but when they did get up and put on the news, it was September 11th, 2001, and it was all over the TV. They just looked at each other and freaked out because it was exactly what I had dreamt the night before. I, of course, don't remember anything. I was 4 years old when this happened, and I've never had anything like it happen to me since. Next, we're going to take a look at a very strange post that was made to the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit around 2 months ago. I used to go to my university on a motorcycle. One day, I was late for class and I was driving quite fast. Suddenly, a man on a horse cart came from the side and blocked the entire 2-lane road. I was going too fast to be able to slow down and was about to crash right in the middle of the horse and the cart. When I was about 5 meters from it, I panicked and closed my eyes. When I opened them, I found myself on the side of the road with my bike stationary. I looked up and the road in front of me was clear. I looked back and the horse cart was still there, but 15 meters behind me. I never applied my brakes and had apparently teleported 20 meters away safely on the side of the road. Still can't explain it to this day. In response to this story, another user replied with their similar experience in the comments. I had a Yamaha RD350, and it was a beast of a bike at the time. I used to wheelie the thing at almost any opportunity, and I would ride everywhere really fast. The front brake was almost non-existent. The whole thing was really an accident waiting to happen. One day, I was out riding, and I came up to an arching bridge really fast. I knew it dropped off quite steeply on the other side, so as I went over it, I picked up the front wheel into a wheelie, probably doing almost 60 miles an hour at this point. As I crested the bridge, there was a truck with a flatbed trailer completely blocking the road as it was trying to reverse into a factory. I had nowhere to go. I slammed the back brake on and brought the bike back onto its 2 wheels, but I was carrying way too much speed, and I realized I was going to hit the trailer really hard and possibly die. I think I also closed my eyes. The next thing I remember, I am slightly further down the same road, now past the truck and traveling in the same direction. Both me and the bike were fine. To this day, I have no idea what happened or how, but I should have crashed. Instead, I seemed to sort of glitch past the danger. It's weird to read that you had something very similar happen to you. Many of you who have been watching these videos for a little while now know that there are plenty of people who claim to have experienced very similar scenarios to these two, typically occurring on the road or in other situations where danger or death appears to be imminent. Now, I've heard many different explanations behind these experiences, with one theory being that the memory loss is explained by the body sort of overriding the mind and taking action. I'd imagine this would be something similar to yanking your hand away after touching a hot surface. Maybe the people don't have memories of avoiding these situations because they're more instinctual than well thought out. Other theories are a bit more abstract, suggesting that these experiences are evidence of quantum immortality. In short, this is the idea that your consciousness can actually avoid death, and that when you die in one universe, your mind actually transfers to another similar one, except there, you didn't die. For me, this is definitely more of just an interesting thought experiment than something I actually believe, but I want to hear your thoughts and comments on what you think is actually behind these stories. My folks and I lived right at the edge of a fairly large national forest. The back 4 acres or so of our property was fenced in, so the dogs could run, but they constantly found ways out and we had to patch holes and fill them in. This had gone on for months and was just a part of life now. One night, I was getting home fairly late, and as I got out of my car, my pappy hollered from somewhere in the woods along the fence. "Hey, since you're home, can you come give me a hand?" The person I was on the phone with heard him and said they'd let me go since it sounded like I had a fence to fix. I hollered back that I was going to set my stuff in the house and that I'd be right there. When I opened the door to set my stuff down, Pappy was sound asleep in the recliner in the living room. As soon as I saw him, every hair on me stood on end. I practically dove inside, shut the door, and slammed that deadbolt home like I was trying to drive it into the door frame. I don't know what was calling me from the woods, but it definitely wasn't my dad. These next two stories come from the same individual, and although they're separated by a little bit of time, I can't help but draw some very clear parallels between the two. We'll circle back at the end to discuss. Right after I bought my place in 2009, I had a roommate while I was engaged and waiting for the wedding, since I didn't live with my fiancé. One night, he had been out to a party, and I stayed home and went to bed instead. At around 2 a.m., he suddenly bursts through my door, panicked, and saying that someone broke into the house and to listen. Right then, I heard the sound of someone running up the stairs to the second floor, where I have a large rec room that's partially over my bedroom, and the noise was moving all over the rec room, stomping very loudly. I burst out of bed and grabbed the pistol that I keep in my nightstand, running to the stairwell, my heart pounding and fully expecting to be seconds away from shooting someone. I got to the top of the stairs, and no one was in the room. I checked the closets, the door to my deck, which was locked, and my office that was upstairs too, also locked. No one was there. We went back downstairs and sat in the living room that is also beneath the rec room, talking about it for a couple minutes, when we hear the sound of someone running around again upstairs. I ran right back up again, and still, no one was there. However, this time, there was furniture pulled out into the middle of the room, and I found the light on in my locked office. A second incident happened one morning when I'd woken up real early to go snowboarding by myself. As I was grabbing breakfast, I noticed some red spots on the floor. My roommate had been out that night before, and I noticed a bag of Arby's sitting on the table and figured he'd spilled some sauce or something. I didn't go ask him because he was still asleep, and I left without giving it a second thought. At around noon, I stopped at a restaurant at the top of the ski area, which was the only place on the mountain that had cell service, to get some lunch and to check my phone. I see several voicemail notifications from both my roommate and my fiance. They were panicked, saying that there was blood all over the floor. I called them back, and they told me that my roommate had woken up to find red spots similar to what I'd seen, literally all over the floors in the house and even up on the counters and the walls. They said they had originally thought one of our pets had been injured, but checked all of them and they were fine. When I got home that evening, I saw for myself the extent of where this substance had appeared. It definitely seemed to be dried blood and was hard to clean up like blood can be, and had that characteristic smell that blood has. It wasn't like big pools, but just little droplets all over. Counters, floors, doors, even chest height on many of the walls. It took hours for us to scrub it all off. It covered the house to an extent that there was no possible way that I could have missed seeing it all when I left that morning. Still, to this day, we have no explanation. Each of these stories is scary enough on their own, specifically since both involve strange things happening throughout this house that nobody was able to account for, but what makes them specifically alarming is that this happened more than once. Now, maybe this is a stretch, and I obviously don't know the layout of this person's house, but it sounds like in that first story, this person or this sound just went upstairs before disappearing. So is it possible that this thing went back into the attic or a crawl space, potentially where it came out of in the first place? What if during that first story, this intruder assumed that both roommates had gone to sleep because everything was so quiet, so they came back down out of the attic, and when their friend got back home by surprise at 2 a.m., they freaked out and tried to run back up the stairs back into hiding? That's just one possible, albeit horrifying scenario, but without any further information, it's impossible to say what really happened here. Back in college, I used to drive up the Oregon coast on weekends, and then just crash in my car when I got tired. I woke from a nap in the driver's seat, and something just didn't feel quite right. It was just getting to be dusk, and the light was fading pretty fast. I yawned and stretched, and as I did so, I turned my head to the side, and just barely caught a face ducking down below my rear passenger window. I went to hit the lock button just to make sure, and in my panic, I accidentally unlocked the doors briefly before locking them again. I stared at the window for a few minutes, knowing that someone was crouching just out of sight. Eventually, I started the car and thought I heard a scuffing sound. Whoever it was didn't reappear, but that was enough for me. As I noped out of there and pulled out back onto Highway 101, I glanced back and a bald figure in a red t-shirt with something wrapped around his face booked it into the woods on the side of the road. That was the end of that weekend trip. I drove the 2 hours back to my dorm room, white-knuckled hands locked on the steering wheel. I had to pull over a few miles down the road, though, to deal with the adrenaline shakes. On that note, we're drawing today's video to a close. Thank you so much for watching, and again, if you have any strange, unexplainable, or unsettling stories of your own, be sure to click the link in the description to head over to the forum and submit your own.